All right, our final exam will open Friday, May 14th in the afternoon, and it'll close Monday, May 17th at 11:55 p.m. Okay, it covers materials from all the chapters that we've covered. There's more emphasis on the more recent chapters, but it is comprehensive, so covers everything. So this, we're going to briefly run through some of the important slides. Um, and you can stop the program if you like. These are slides I think you've probably seen before. Okay, so one of our main themes is science. And so science is a form of everyday thinking, not used in science fiction, but used by things like auto mechanics and in the legal profession. Okay, science is systematic, based on observation, and we evaluate ideas by testing them and evidence. Okay, not all evidence is the same. So in science, we try and use multiple types of evidence and prefer stronger evidence. So clinical trials are better than an observation. Okay, in the end, scientists are very likely to do good work. We evaluate evidence based on ideas. We can be wrong, but over time, things tend to get better, um, particularly in things where there's ideas are rigorously applied. Okay, we also dealt a little bit with chemistry, and so with chemistry, we can answer some really difficult questions like, is there life on Mars? Okay, and that question of life on Mars really involves water because we are mostly water, and so search for life on Mars is a search for water and features that are consistent with water. Okay, in human biology, chemistry matters a lot. We not only talk about the chemistry of water, but a lot of organic matter. We also talk about cells. Okay, we are made of cells, trillions of cells. Cells are alive, they do everything that we do. Okay, we have these different types of cells doing different jobs, and these are organized into tissues. Okay, tissues are just groups of cells that are located in nearby areas and cooperating. So they form things like um, organs, membranes, the skin. That's our simplest organ, which is just a couple layers of cells. Okay, sometimes cells go bad. Okay, like in cancer, and so these are cells that have altered behavior because their DNA has been altered. We talked about that with skin cancer. Okay, in general, tissues and cells are trying to work to maintain an internal environment that allows life to continue. And so this is homeostasis, and this is usually done by a negative feedback system, where a sensor detects change, activates a control center, which then can determine what action should be best to oppose that change. So we talked about body temperature regulation. Um, the flow of blood to the skin and sweat glands can be used to regulate our temperature at a standard area. And we're really good at it. We're much better at regulating temperature than most animals. Like dogs, they have difficulty with it because they can't sweat. All they can do is pant. Okay, so we talked about the skin, layers of the skin, the epidermis and the dermis, hair follicles, sweat glands, blood flow, things like that. Skin cancer and skin color, though that was a big topic, determined by some cells in the skin that make a pigment, and that protects us from ultraviolet light in the sun. Okay, we also talked about the cardiovascular system, the blood vessels and the heart that are involved in transport, regulation, and protection. Okay, problems with this system are really serious. Hypertension is persistent elevated blood pressure when you're at rest, damages blood vessels throughout the body, damages the heart. Complications are very serious, but it doesn't have many symptoms until it has progressed quite far. Another really serious problem with the cardiovascular system is atherosclerosis. That's the accumulation of plaque in the arteries, particularly in the arteries of the heart and in the brain. It's a major cause of heart disease and stroke, the two most important killers, two of the three most important killers of Americans. Okay, the nervous system. carries sensory information, activates muscles and glands. We talked about the general functions of these cells, and then about specific regions like brain regions. Um, Regions that are connected to one another, to the cortex, that can do things like homeostasis, emotions, and thoughts. Really important type stuff. Here we talked about concussions. This is really delicate tissue. The endocrine system is a system of chemicals that are released into body fluids, the blood. These are hormones, and they act as messengers, and those messages can be received by cells that have receptors. So here we have a hormone binding to a receptor at the surface of the cell, and that tells the cell what to do. And so often these are involved in homeostasis. Um, and hormones are slower than nervous system control of things, but often we control lots of things this way. Good example of that is the pancreas releases a hormone to control blood sugar. And so that hormone is insulin. And if something goes wrong with that, that's a big problem, and that's diabetes. There's two types of diabetes, an adult onset type 2 diabetes, which is increasing dramatically, and juvenile diabetes or type 1, which is caused by immune system. We also talked about hormones when we talked about the reproductive system. Brain releases a series of hormones that then affect a gland called the pituitary gland, and that affects the ovary that controls, or the testes that control our reproductive system, the development of sex organs and behaviors. It also produces secondary sex characteristics that we associate with male and femaleness. Um, in women, these are breast development, but also things like the distribution of fat, types of skin, distribution of hair, temperature, growth rates, things like that. Okay, whoops, do I have that twice? Oops, hold on. Yeah, okay. All right. So, and this led us to a discussion of genetics and inheritance. That we have two genes for each trait, and those traits then, or those genes can determine the trait. Some are dominant, some are recessive. Okay, knowing the system that these genes produce traits, they do that by producing proteins, and so we can take those genes out of the body and we can put them into bacteria or yeast cells and actually get them to make the proteins that can be then used as a treatment. So, like for people that have diabetes, we can take the gene for insulin and we can take that gene and put it in bacteria so we can harvest insulin and use that insulin to treat diabetes. So this is DNA technologies that can be used for medicines, like insulin or growth hormone. We make vaccines this way. We produce new crops that are resistant to pests or have improved characteristics like drought resistance or growth rates. So big industry. This has also been really important in that we can these technologies are used to help identify DNA. And so we can identify small sections of DNA from tiny samples that are like left at crime scenes or um, maybe residues on something. And so this is really helping to improve our criminal justice system. We just couldn't tell with as much certainty about identification of suspects or residues. Now all we need is one cell. Okay, and so then this headed us into the section on evolution, because now we know how traits are transmitted from one organism to another and that the trait is carried in DNA but it's expressed as a protein. We know that genetic changes that happen in populations can happen over time, and that if some genes become more common, those traits will become more common. And we know that genes can mutate by having just a small change in DNA. And so this can lead to new traits, new adaptations, and maybe over time, new species. And if some of these individuals that have these new traits are able to reproduce more, leave more children, their traits are likely to spread. And so this, if they're better at finding food or maybe better looking or maybe better able to withstand hard conditions because they have certain traits, they'll their traits are going to spread in the environment. This is natural selection. There's lots of evidence that this occurs, and really modern agriculture is based on selecting good traits. So that's artificial selection. But we also see evidence of change in what organisms are present in fossils. We see it happening on islands. We can see the anatomical features of this in living animals, and we can also look at the molecules. We can also apply this to ourselves. We can look at what is the biological origin of people, and in particular, we can compare this to closely related but extinct species. We can see the similarities and look for the evidence that suggests Neanderthals are pretty close to us, that they resemble humans. Okay, so then there were a couple chapters on ecology at the end. That's more recent stuff, so I didn't feel the need to go over that. You can look over that your old quizzes for that. Look over the old study guides and reading hints, and use that. Okay. The exams again will open on Friday, May 14th, and they will close on May 17th. That's next Monday. Okay, great.